Welcome to the High EQ Marketer. I'm John Busby. This show is about learning from the best and most interesting marketers in the world, which are, not a coincidence, highly emotionally intelligent. If you'd like inspiration, lessons, war stories from startups or Fortune 500 companies, that's why we're here. So let's go. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Deanna Ransom, who is the President and Executive Director of Women in Revenue. If you want to hear a story about leading successful teams and advancing your career with EQ, this is the episode. To me, Deanna is the epitome of a high EQ leader because she attributes her success and her team's success in things like having a common mission, a common dictionary, open communication. We talk a lot in this episode about what Deanna has learned during her career, including how she received some tough feedback from a mentor that really changed the trajectory of how she approached giving back in her career. We also, towards the end of our conversation, talk about the organization's mission, that organization being Women in Revenue, and the results of an annual survey Deanna's organization conducts on the top challenges facing women in revenue-generating positions. It's clear that our work is not done here. While there are a few guarantees in life, I guarantee you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Also, please take 2 minutes and hit that 5-star, leave a review, and subscribe. Pretty please. Hi, Deanna. How are you today?
I'm well, John. How are you?
Doing good. Great to see you.
You too.
So before we talk about your work at Women in Revenue, I want to go way back to your early career, because your early career actually wasn't in marketing. It was in field sales for enterprise software, for ERP. What was your job? How did you get into that line of work? And what did you learn in those early days?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. Before I even got into sales, I started off, believe it or not, in customer service. I literally ran the customer solution center, if you can remember those days.
Oh, yeah.
I ran that. So when the customers came in after they purchased their solution and they needed to do their training, I was the person who oversaw that entire experience. And I learned in that capacity how important it is to make human connection, build relationships, really be able to want, with genuine authenticity and curiosity, to understand what people want and need. And it was that experience of customer service where I caught the eye of one of the VPs who said, I think you have a career in sales ahead of you. I would like you to join sales. And at that time, I'm like, what? But he was right, and he gave me that opportunity. And, I went into sales, and at that time, it was quite a bit of travel. And again, something that I learned at that time was, number one, it was called the complex sale, right? Many folks thought that it was complex because of the solution. It was complex because of the people and the number of people and the relationships you had to build and the trust that you had to gain, right, across buying centers at that time before there was, LinkedIn, dare I say that, to really be able to connect with people. And so if there's anything that I learned, it was about the connections and relationships of people and hearing what they need. The transition to marketing was very, very easy because for me, it became, how do I get more warm leads? It was kind of
Right.
self-serving. But once I kind of transitioned to the other side, I became very enamored and very curious because what I saw was, from a sales perspective, I thought it was all about what marketing needed to do for me, the leads they needed to give to me. But I started to understand, what they really had to do on the other side of that fence, understanding the needs of the customer, making sure they were reaching the right people. It was another level of building relationships, but more en masse. And that
Yes.
fascinated me. And that was what made me take that transition.
It's funny that you said that because my first job was at a startup, and I was there my first day, first week. Thought my job was going to be writing copy for a website and stuff like that. There was a phone in a server room that was ringing, and I said, "Why? Is that our number? Who's calling?" They said, "Well, I think that's our customer service line, but we don't answer that line." And I said,
Oh,
"Oh,
right.
that might be
I'm
a
like, oh,
problem." And so suddenly I became the head of customer service. So I went into that not knowing, but I learned the same thing that you did, which is that number one, not all customers had the same opinion of the product as I did. And by learning what they wanted, I became a better marketer, became a better product manager, became a better listener. And that sounds like one of the things you uncovered very early in customer service. But I want to go back before marketing. You were talking about the complex sale and building and gaining trust. What were some of the tools maybe that you either had naturally or you honed early in your career? Because I remember early when I was trying to sell things and I was new in my career, I was like a young guy trying to sell into business professionals that knew their business better than I did. So how did you overcome that?
100%. And then imagine, add on to that, John, at the time I was a young woman of color in ERP sales, right? So, and predominantly focused, I was in the Midwest. So it was a lot of fun. Um, so some of the things that, served me well was A, I'm curious by nature. B, I'm a listener. And I have a genuine heart and desire, serves me in my current role, but it has served me well over time, of wanting to hear what people really need so that I can make the connection point of how I can support that. People sell to people became a big thing a while ago, but back then I recognized if I could help someone by being able to get back home to their kid's soccer game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't have to sit and wait for the report to run for 2 days. That was the win that they really ultimately wanted. So curiosity, listening, empathy, things that we're talking about now more than ever were the things that served for me at that time because, walking in, I tended um, to not look like everyone else in the room. And so
Mm-hmm.
needing to create that genuine human connection became the thing that I had to do very quickly. I didn't want to go in and try to act like I knew their business or try to, talk tech too much. I genuinely wanted to connect with the people and know what they really needed so that we could make that connection point.
Yeah, and I feel like some of the failures that I personally had when I was engaged in a sales process was thinking through everything logically.
Mm,
Almost like, well, our product does this better, it does that better, it does this other thing better, so they're obviously going to choose us, and not and missing out on whether it's an emotional part of the decision or
mm.
not empathizing or when something goes wrong, are they going to want to call me? you know
Yeah,
those
that's
types of things
genuine.
are so important.
It
Yeah.
really is because at that time, sales did tend to focus more on feature function. We also had what we called vaporware. People talked about
Mm-hmm.
vaporware and such. So it was important that it really be built on this relationship. I can remember when we did our very large annual customer events. That was where you really wanted to sit, build rapport, just have human interactions with your prospects and your customers so that when they did run into a problem, it didn't show up in one of those customer service strings. It was, hey, I need to reach out and make a phone call because they knew you'd be available for that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think to myself, I'm starting to go out and go to conferences again and see people in person. And it's even though in-person conferences like in some ways feel so inefficient
Mm-hmm.
compared to hopping on Zoom and just doing calls all day. There's this kind of magnetic energy when two people are smiling at each other and have a conversation in the same room. That really makes a difference. I wonder, before we get into marketing, what are you seeing in this Zoom or hybrid world that makes things either better or more challenging from a marketing standpoint, and
Yeah,
sales too?
that is a fair question because it's so easy in the digital world to, I call it, digital transaction, right? It's very hard to connect. We as humans, we give off energy, right? When we are in the same place at the same time, we're able to connect to that energy. We're able to tap into our emotional intelligence with a lot more accuracy, right? Because you're actually connecting with that human. And I feel like not that you cannot do that digitally, but you need to lean in a lot harder and really focus on other cues in order to pick up on that in person is not as difficult to do. So I think for me, it's making sure that we remember we're always talking to humans regardless of the medium. Make sure that you're paying attention using that emotional intelligence. If they're silent, why are they being silent? Right? If they're not responding quickly, why are they not responding quickly? It's not necessarily because they're rejecting what you're saying. It could be that they're thinking through what's being shared. And I think we have to use different processors digitally than we do when we connect with a person human.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you moved from sales to marketing. I had a friend who had been in marketing for 20 years and took a sales role to Fortune 500 companies. So he went the other way, and we had a
Wow.
side converse. He had a side we had a side conversation, and he told me he learned more about how marketing could support sales in his first couple of months as a sales representative than he almost did in marketing. And it struck me how important that relationship is between
Mm,
the sales team and the marketing team in your mind, especially in a B2B setting. What's kind of the playbook and process of relationship building between sales and marketing functions to create the revenue machine that every company wants?
yeah, I because I went the other way, it's kind of like, what? Who goes from marketing into sales? Like, who does that? But I think that every good marketer should spend time in sales. I think it helps to understand why it's so important to build the alliance, the partnership, um, the relationship that's necessary to create a full on revenue engine, which must include customer success. I just want to throw that in there. The revenue engine, from my perspective, includes marketing, sales, and customer success, and they work seamlessly, hand in hand in relationship. And so for me, one of the, a couple of things that stand out in building that tighter knit relationship in a playbook starts with a couple of things. One, you need to have a common dictionary or common language. I find that, simple words that, one department may use over another, they have different meanings. What's a lead? What is a real opportunity?
Hmm.
When so you have to have a dictionary, a common language that is agreed upon so that when words are used, everyone knows exactly what the definition of that word is. The other element, having gone over from sales into marketing, and I'm thinking about your friend going over from marketing into sales, is really having a true respect for what each of these teams brings to the table. It is not an organizational construct that's going to make it work. It is a respect and a communication that is going to make it work. So respect communication, how do you communicate? Based off of common language and shared goals and outcomes. So to me, that's the playbook, right? The trust, the communication, really making sure that, the revenue engine starts based off of we want the same outcome, we share the same language, and we have a healthy respect to work together to get it done.
I agree. Those things are so important. How do you find time as a leader to balance, the daily sales meetings and the focusing on the numbers and how many calls are you making and how many emails are you sending out to make sure you're devoting time for this? Do you have any techniques or suggestions for folks that want to do something like this in their organization but always feel behind?
Well, I mean, I think there it starts with what's the role you play. So let's say I'm going to give an example. As a marketing leader, right? I've always had amazing teams that, knew their role, played their role well. I never felt like I had to do it all by myself. This allowed me to be able to focus, to go and advocate for my team, to go and have necessary conversations with the other leaders in the organization, to go out and sit on sales calls so that I could understand the day in the life, so I could bring that back to the team and empower them. And I sense that, say I am a marketing manager, understanding, okay, my role is I need to make sure that the campaigns or the strategy that I'm deploying support sales. Am I listening to what sales is coming back with in terms of feedback? Am I paying attention to what the customers are saying when they're responding to what I'm sending out? And am I bubbling that up into everything that I'm doing? These are the things that become significantly important. Sales teams, because I love to get a chance to talk to them. Am I giving marketing feedback on the leads that I'm getting? Am I telling them the reason why I'm rejecting them? Am I even paying attention to them
Mm-hmm.
right before I just reject them? That communication. How do you create that time? Everyone doing their part orchestrates the symphony that becomes the revenue engine. I recommend that's how, teams and various roles kind of do their part, bring it back together. And what's the cadence of communication, John? Right? How often do the leaders of the team need to come together? How often do the teams themselves come together? Is it a QBR? Is it a monthly check-in? What's the right cadence? Each organization, there's no cookie cutter
Mm-hmm.
that says you need to do this. What happens is when you're looking at the rate of growth that you need to achieve and the performance of the business, you and your leadership and your teams need to sit down, set a cadence, check it. Is it working? Great. Let's continue. Is it not working? Let's adjust it. Maybe we need to meet bi-weekly for a time, right? Until we really get a rhythm. It is a little bit of a recipe. Is it a pinch of salt or is it a whole teaspoon?
Yeah, so it almost sounds like as much as all leaders need to and should be looking at the numbers, also looking at the process by which we approach the numbers and the process by which we approach each other as groups, and paying it as close attention to that as anything else is a great recipe for success. And clearly, Deanna, your leadership style is very high on empathy and listening and emotional intelligence, and I'm sure a bunch of people listening are saying, how do I get that? How do I do that if it doesn't come naturally to me? But I kind of want to flip the question. It's obviously been an asset for you, but we all hit speed bumps moving up the corporate ladder. Whether
Mm.
whether we come up in sales and maybe we didn't have a traditional marketing background, or we're a performance marketer like me, but you don't have brand marketing experience, or there's not knowing how to navigate internal organizations, or advocating for yourself, et cetera. Can you talk about your personal experience, and then also what advice you would give to others that are sort of on their way up in their career and need like that one additional thing in order to accomplish their objectives?
100%. Because again, it is a personal journey. I want to put that out there because when you're working in an enterprise company versus a mid-sized company versus a startup, you're dealing with very different dynamics. In an enterprise company, for example, I've been fortunate to be at a few Fortune 500 companies. They are living, breathing culture dynamics and communities unto themselves. How do you navigate within that? I looked for sponsors and advocates. You have to network outside of the people that you work with every single day so that you can get a wider lens and perspective. I recommend, you know, just building those communications and being curious so that you can learn about, the organization itself. What's its heartbeat? What's the common way that we kind of connect here? In a mid-sized organization, not only do you have the opportunity to look for mentors and advocates and sponsors, I also recommend that you talk to just people across teams. Just talk with them. Hear and understand what's going on there. These things support you and show up in your work in ways that you're not even familiar with yet. Because you'll start to go, wait, I recognize when I do this downstream, the customer service team may need to do this. So now you're able to build these things in. In a startup organization, I recommend a couple of things. Things are moving very, 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 very quickly all day, every day. You need to have, outside community and perspective to make sure that you don't get so caught up in the the constant changes in the startup environment that you're not bringing in outside perspective that can help you continue to grow the innovation within the organization. So when you're talking about, experience and advice, community is everything. If you are unsure how to advocate for yourself, make a list of 5 people who you believe are invested or at least want to see you succeed. Reach out, ask for 15 minutes, be specific in your ask, right? Don't just say, hey, can I have some of your time? People are busy. But say, I'd love to give 15 minutes to ask you 3 questions as I'm trying to navigate my career and value what you've been able to achieve. Something that simple is so game changing.
That is that is gold. I can talk about my personal experience at Amazon, which is the only Fortune 500 company that I've worked at. But you're so right about a culture being unique. Actually, Amazon would call their culture peculiar. That's the
Mm.
word that Amazon uses. But I met so many amazing people there, and the ones that were kind of most successful in terms of their career trajectory at Amazon were intensely curious and tried to understand every part of the business. And so I can see that being incredibly important. And also at a startup, you're right. You can be so kind of inwardly focused. If you're not bringing outside things to the table, you're probably not doing a good job at that. And so you made the comment that you should build a list of folks that might advocate for you or might end up becoming a mentor for you. I know you're an active mentor. How did you flip the switch in order to be open to others? And then how do you see your role as a mentor to others?
You know, I'm happy to answer that because part of what gave me the strength, the courage, if you will, to step into being a mentor was recognizing the role that others had played in my life and how, had it not been for those mentors, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair. I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. And what a sin it would be if I couldn't give that back, if I couldn't help someone move past their fear, to, encourage them. And I literally had a mentor, one of the folks that he was a mentor sponsor. And, he said to me, Deanna, I'm not sure why you are not reaching back to help others, which that hurt me because I'm like, I'm always about helping others. But he's like, you have something to give, but you're not giving it because you still think you need to prove yourself. And that hurt, but he was right. And when I walked away, I said, I'm going to do something different. And I started reaching back, and specifically for me, as a woman of color who came up in tech, I wanted to be the help that I didn't have. I wanted to reach out and make sure that all of the ceilings I cracked my head on and steps I climbed, I could make it so that maybe another woman could take an elevator versus climbing the steps. Or maybe, or maybe she got a little less glass in her hair. And so for me, that was the process, a mentor speaking to me that I needed to give back. In fact, that it was my duty to give back. And I take that very seriously. And that was the process for me. And I started making myself available. Even before this work, I ran my own nonprofit. I also led at National Association of Professional Women, and it became a joy to help women navigate some of the challenges and to see themselves differently. So for me, that's how I became a mentor and why I am such a fan and advocate of mentorship.
It was great you were able to take that tough feedback that your mentor gave you. And to me, that confirms that the role of a mentor is in part to lift up your mentee and encourage your mentee, but also to provide like sometimes some hard truth that there's some growth and some feedback that needs to happen in order for someone to achieve the next level. That's awesome that you were able to turn that into something that's become a career passion for you. And that's a great segue. Let's talk about Women in Revenue and your current organization. You're the president and executive director. What does Women in Revenue do, and what's your involvement and your day-to-day mission, if you will?
Yes. So Women in Revenue is a nonprofit organization that has a mission to achieve 100% equity and inclusion for women in revenue generating roles. This comprises women that are primarily in marketing, sales, customer success, and RevOps, right? Very important, RevOps. And so for us, we have core programs. Mentorship is one of them if you haven't figured that out. We also have our equity resource programming and a speakers bureau, which supports visibility and personal branding and speaking opportunities. Equity resource programming is this two-pronged approach to supporting corporates with evolving the culture of work to support better equity and inclusion while empowering women with the curated content and tools that they need to continue on their evolution and journey. So I'm really excited about this work. My particular role here is to set vision and strategy and to really take this community of very close to 7,000 women and to shift to a full-on movement, right? I personally believe that um, equity and inclusion is a part of corporate social responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
What could be your deeper responsibility than your people and the legacy that you make on them for the world? And so that is a big piece of my work here, working with our sponsors and investors and ensuring that as we are looking down the line for the next 3, 5, 10 years, that we are helping to reshape the culture of work for one that is for the good, that leaves a legacy on the world.
And one of the ways you're deciding how to approach your programs, I understand it, is feedback and data from your members. And I know when we talked offline, you do an annual survey of your members and you uncovered the top challenges that women state that they face, women particularly in revenue generating positions. So I'd love to know, what did you learn in your latest study?
Yeah, and it's almost time for us to release our annual survey, so stay tuned for that. We're going to be putting that out shortly. But in our previous study that we released this year, we found that the top 5 challenges that women stated was the need for compensation, transparency, and equity. They wanted more mentorship opportunities and support. They needed more work flexibility, better balance, and healthier families. And I'm finding that I'm thinking about number three quite a bit, particularly now as organizations are starting to enforce, going back into an office and wondering what that impact is going to look like for women. We also found that number four was the great resignation. You have folks who are resigning, renegotiating, quiet quitting, that big impact, which truly hit women in a way that was unprecedented. And the fifth top challenge really, hits home and is very painful because it was listed as sexual harassment, John.
Oh,
And that
geez.
shows up particularly for minority women in our study. And, we talked about that in the sense of recognizing that sexual harassment is not just physical, um, but the fact that it's 2022, almost 2023, and that is showing up as one of the top five challenges is super concerning. And I think about some of the challenges and things that have happened over the course of this year with decisions that have been made. What are we going to do to mitigate and turn this around? And so those are the top five things that we found in the previous study.
And it feels like those things may be more pronounced for women in revenue generating positions, due to the nature of the role in always having to meet a number, or sort of these things that have been traditionally male dominated. Is that fair to say?
That is so fair to say because if you think about, sales still very predominantly male dominated. Owning a number was something that was traditionally seen as a male dominated element. And so as women are moving forward, as they are advancing, as we are looking for equity and coming into environments that weren't originally created for women to be in those spaces, you can imagine the friction and the evolution that needs to happen for it to become, equitable. And so this is a challenge. I mean, I think about, walking in, imagine, how a look can make someone feel comfortable or uncomfortable. Imagine how words inside conversations in an environment can make someone feel comfortable or uncomfortable. And it just elevates. And this is a true challenge that speaks to how do we evolve the culture of work to one that is intentionally equitable for everyone in the space.
So I know that you do work with women directly, but you also work with organizations, and the organization itself needs to be intentionally equitable. If an organizational leader wants to work with women in revenue, what how do they get started?
Oh my gosh. Email me, ping me, but most importantly, you know, go to the website. We have womeninrevenue.org. You can find ways. Number one, we have an allyship program. That is huge. Why? This transformation in the culture of work is not something that can be done by any one group. It will take allies. It will take supporters. So you can connect with us in various ways on the website to be an ally, to be a sponsor, to be a part of our equity resource programming through our sponsorship, because this is how we come alongside. And if you already have an ERG, we come alongside and support that. If you do not have an ERG, our equity resource program has the ability through our curated three-pronged approach, gender focus, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and allyship, to help support a, a more holistic approach to an organization growing and evolving and encouraging. a more equitable and inclusive environment. So the website, and if you don't want to go to the website, I'm on LinkedIn. Honestly, reach out to me or any member of the board, and let's just make sure that we're working together to get this done.
Deanna, I love it. Thanks so much for talking with me today.
It has been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to The High EQ Marketer. Subscribe to us anywhere you listen to podcasts, and if you enjoyed this episode, please drop us a like, rate the show 5 stars. That's the high EQ thing to do. Thanks for listening.